majestically and kicks the goal. Making something out of nothing.
Malcheski, is that the grand final?
Jimmy Bartell can make a hero of himself.
That is a brilliant snap. He's kicked the goal and Freeman will win it after the siren. What a game of football at the MCG.
Welcome to the Protected Zone, which you can actually find on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, or on our website, theprotectedzone.com. These are the issues that we'll be talking about this week. We review the big matches from round 15 and the rare draw that we predicted correctly.
And we also discussed the red card after Thomas Bugg's big boxing match at the MCG.
And we look at Collingwood's options for new coaches or a new coach and whether they should go code hopping or appoint a politician.
And we also give Brisbane a new team song this week.
And we also preview the big matches for round 16 in this, the best AFL season ever. I'm Eddie J, broadcasting from Sydney.
And it's Linton Anam from West Sumatra, Padang.
So, Lintang, how are things going in Sumatra?
I don't want to sound a broken record, but I have to keep repeating it's very hot. And today it feels like 36 degrees again. This time of the day, everything's hot.
Well, it's only 17 degrees in Sydney today, only 14 degrees in Melbourne. But Lintang, we're not a weather program, we're an AFL football program, so let's get right into it. Round 15 was another great round of AFL football. It was AFL football at its best.
Yes, in our living memory anyway, some old codgers may dispute 1928 was better or 1856 was better, or but as far as we can remember, this is, full of tension. And last week we had three games decided in the final quarter. The teams came up to take the lead and only to be knocked off. And actually, as we predicted, there was a draw, wasn't it?
Yes, we did predict a draw last weekend. Now, the only issue is that we didn't predict it for the Greater Western Sydney against Geelong game. We actually predicted it for the Melbourne against Sydney game. So we got the wrong game, but we did predict a draw, and it actually happened, the first draw of the season, and it was a fantastic match.
Yes, we got the city right, though. The team from Sydney got the first draw. And that was an exciting game. The game was kind of decided after the siren. Everyone was watching after Tom Hawkins grabbed the contested mark. And that was a tight angle, about 30 metres, I reckon. And his shot at the goal went a bit of a drift. And he managed to score only a point. Geelong didn't lose, so that was good. But it was not the best result they wanted.
No, it's a very strange situation where Geelong didn't win, they didn't lose. Greater Western Sydney didn't lose and they didn't win. So they had a draw. And in the post-match interviews, when they spoke to all the different players, they said, well, it's a very weird feeling, and they seemed quite disappointed. But I was very excited about this result. I think it was a fantastic match, and it was a fantastic result for both teams.
Yes, the Geelong was, leading by, 20 points early in the final quarter. And then the Giants came back and scored 21 in the following 20 minutes or so. It was just, wow, they've got momentum. I thought they were going all the way, but they couldn't. I think one of the reasons Giants couldn't, keep on going was that power forward, Jonathan Patton. I like him. He kicked, I think, his fourth goal, and then went off the ground and didn't come back on for 5 minutes or so. And that killed the momentum, I think.
So, Lynn, why did he go off the ground for 5 minutes? That seems like a very, very long time.
Yes, Eddie, I read about it somewhere that it was a sort of planned rotation thing, and straight after he kicked the goal, and at that stage, still 7 minutes to go or something, and Jonathan Patton came off. Somehow he couldn't get back on for 5 minutes, and the momentum was lost. I think it was a bad coaching or, whatever. They should have told Patton to stay on the ground and just score another goal.
Yes, they should have left him on the ground because Greater Western Sydney kept on delivering the ball into their forward line, but Patton was not there. There was no big player to take the big grab and kick some more goals. So it was definitely a huge mistake on the coach's behalf.
Yes, Eddie. But what do you think about this tie? You said, some players thought it was a weird feeling. I remember hearing similar comments after that famous grand final draw, Collingwood versus St Kilda a few years back. Some players expressed it was a very hollow feeling.
Well, I can understand why players are disappointed about that, but once again, AFL presents itself as a metaphor for life, because in this situation, in the game between St Kilda and Collingwood in the 2010 grand final, the two teams were evenly matched. They couldn't be split, so of course that's the obvious result, a draw. And in the game between Greater Western Sydney and Geelong, the two teams were evenly matched. So what better way to reward both teams by giving them 2 points each and calling it a draw? I think it's a fantastic result.
Indeed. And what are the other matches you looked at this weekend, Eddie?
We've talked about Richmond and Port Adelaide. Are the real deal or are they imposters? And I think we found out on the weekend that Richmond are the real deal and Port Adelaide are the imposters.
Is it safe to declare Richmond are real deal?
Yes, I think they are the real deal. We've had this discussion virtually every week for the past 15 rounds, and yes, Richmond are looking pretty good. Port Adelaide, on the other hand, they haven't defeated a top 8 team all season. They've got a very healthy percentage. They're still in the top 8. They're number 5 at the moment, but they haven't beaten anyone of note so far. So I think we can safely say that Richmond are the real deal, Port Adelaide are the imposters. Now also, speaking about imposters, I think that Melbourne can also be labelled imposters as well.
Yes, they were in unfamiliar territory.
They're not familiar with being a winning team, and it seems like now they're in the top 8, or everyone's talking about them being a top 8 team and making the finals for the first time in 11 years. They don't know really what to do with themselves. And
yes, I watched the game, and it was a strange game. Swans were, really, getting the general play, but early on they couldn't convert. And they were, piling up behinds after behinds, and Melbourne were kept in the game just because they were, slightly more accurate. But, Melbourne finally crumbled down when the heat was turned on, and Buddy's just fantastic.
Oh, Lance Franklin, he's a fantastic footballer. But just getting back to that inaccuracy of the Sydney Swans, I think they were playing so well that even if they didn't kick any goals at all, and if they just racked up behind after behind after behind, they probably still would have won the game. That's how dominant they were, especially in the first half of the game.
Exactly. And Luke Parker was just brilliant. He was leading from the front, and you're right. They could have won by 90 behinds against 3 goals or something.
I could easily see that happening. Yeah, so I think we can start calling the Melbourne team the imposters of the year, and they're certainly pretty good at the boxing, but they're not so great at the football.
Yes, we're going to discuss that later on, but a lot of teams have been getting a bit physical. The eyes off the ball and, going for the body kind of thing. We'll discuss that later. But another big match in Melbourne this weekend was West Coast versus Western.
Oh, yes, the Battle of the West in the East. It was a fantastic game. We predicted that the West Coast Eagles would not win this game purely because it was being played in Melbourne, and we were wrong.
Yes, but that was played in not at MCG.
No, it wasn't played at the MCG. It was played at the Docklands. West Coast Eagles have actually got a slightly better record at the Docklands. They were also up against the reigning premiers, Western Bulldogs. And have the Western Bulldogs that is, have they lost their passion, or is something else going on?
It's hard to tell, but one sort of way to analyse them is they're still sort of waiting for the right time to making the charge. To repeat the last year's feast, they only have to sneak in at number 7. Once they got sneak into a number 7, they remember how to do it. So no point winning, meaningless games at this stage. They're aiming at number 7, I think.
Well, the way that they're playing at the moment, I think that's probably the highest that they can aim for. Speaking of imposters, there's another team that I'd like to label the imposters as well. Even though they won their game against Carlton, I think that Adelaide are the imposters as well.
Whoa, that's a big call. And 1, 2, 3, 4 imposters already. And they are all in the top 8 at the moment. My God, that's a big call.
Well, it's a very big call, but Adelaide were playing against Carlton on the weekend. Adelaide are putatively a top team. They're currently number 2 on the ladder. And Carlton are way, way down. Now, they have improved this year, but up until the final 5 minutes or so, Carlton were actually leading the game. And then Adelaide managed to use their experience and possibly their class and run away. They only won by 2 goals in this game.
Yes, that was a close game, another close game. The Blues with many long sleevers. I couldn't tell which one's which, but by the way, the Carlton, out of all the teams, were leading, although briefly, in the final quarter. And if they had shorter sleeves, they might have kept on going. I think it's a wrong decision to allow so many players to wear long sleeves.
Well, you do have to take into account things such as wind resistance, and if you're wearing long sleeves, that probably slows down each player marginally. So how many players were wearing long sleeves for Carlton?
I couldn't tell. Silvani, for example, that's the father-son thing. Silvani's have to wear long sleeves, but everyone looked like Silvani. I couldn't count, but there seems to be too many of them wearing long sleeves. It's aerodynamically challenging. They should know that.
Yes, they should know that, and it's possibly the first time in history that a team has lost a game having too many players wearing long sleeves. So it's especially when you've got such a close match. They were leading in the final part of the final quarter, but they lost by 2 goals. That's possibly what made the difference. Their long sleeves, it slowed them down a little bit. They lost the game. They won't do that again.
Yeah, I hope not. And some of them need a bit of haircut too. Everyone should be like Gary Ablett, who we are going to talk about later on. But think about, Gary Ablett, no aerodynamic resistance. That's the future of AFL.
Well, speaking of wind resistance and hair, Dyson Heppel for Essendon, he's got very, very long hair.
But I prefer the Gary Ablett hairdo.
Well, Dyson Heppel, he did actually use the word selfish on the weekend, and he was referring to the Essendon-Brisbane game. So, Lynn, what happened in the Essendon-Brisbane game?
Again, Essendon was, leading by, close to 5 goals deep into the final quarter. And, that's a game against Brisbane. Brisbane's still sitting at the bottom. But Brisbane players seem to have had more energy. They're more enjoying the game, footy they're playing. And while on the other hand, Essendon players seems to be, especially in the final quarter, they seem to be asleep at the wheel.
I think they were asleep at the wheel, but also I think they're becoming a little bit numerically challenged. Last week, in their match against the Sydney Swans, they were 19 points up with 3 minutes to go in the match, and they ended up losing. This time around, they were halfway through the final quarter, and they were 27 points up, and they lost the game by 8 points. I think they've got a misunderstanding of how far they actually are ahead, because 27 points, as anyone will tell you, is not a big lead in modern day football. It can easily be overrun very, very quickly, as Essendon found out.
Yes, indeed. And as much as Essendon, were sort of running out of gas or, playing selfish football, I was impressed by the Lions, and they've got the seriously good players. I think they're going to win a few more games in this season, and if the season's extended by a few more games or a few months or a few years, they could easily win the premiership.
They could. I suspect that they've probably left their run a little bit late, but who knows? 2018 could be a fascinating year for the Brisbane Lions. So you're listening to The Protected Zone, where you can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, and also find us on our website, theprotectedzone.com. And coming up soon, we're talking about the red card. A red card in AFL football. We have it in soccer. It's in quite a few other leagues around the world. What do you think about the idea of red card in AFL football, Lynn?
I'm not too familiar with what red card means. Can you explain?
Oh, I certainly can. In soccer, or the other style of football, which I know that you don't prefer, the referee will have two cards in their pocket. They'll have a yellow card and a red card. If it's a minor infringement, they'll pull out the yellow card, and that's just to mark against the player's name. If they get a second yellow card, they get sent off the ground. With a red card, if they have some sort of misdemeanour, such as kicking a player or pushing them away or tackling in the wrong way, they're given a red card immediately. It's shown directly to the player's face, and they go off into the dressing rooms. They have a shower, and that's the end of them for the match. Now, I must point out that a red card is actually available to all AFL umpires all around Australia, except for the top line leagues. So in the WAFL, South Australian League and the AFL, there are no red cards available. But in every other league, an umpire has got the discretion to send a player off the ground. If they kick someone or maim someone or break a leg or do something untoward, they can send them off immediately. So it's already available in the game of AFL, but it just doesn't exist at the top line. So do you think it's something that could work?
I'm not sure about that. And, I think current system or traditional system seems working. Some players punched someone above your neck can still play out the game and wait for the judge's decision later on and given 6 weeks or whatever.
Which is what did happen to Thomas Bugg. He was suspended for 6 matches tonight, so it's a difficult one to work out. I can understand that teams, especially if they lose a player in the first couple of minutes, which is what happened to Callum Mills on the weekend. He was punched out by Thomas Bugg. The Sydney Swans played with one player less for the entire game. Thomas Bugg played for the rest of the game. So he was still in the game. He'll be suspended for the next 6 games. Well, the teams that receive the benefit of his suspension are the teams that Melbourne play for the next 6 weeks and not the Sydney Swans. So it seems like they're penalised a little bit by not having that player sent off, and the Sydney Swans have one player less for their own team. So it's a bit of a tough one to work out.
Exactly. And, we have to leave it at grey zone, as far as red card is concerned. But generally speaking, is that, do you notice that players are getting a bit more physical of late, in the last round or two? Is that because we're getting closer to the business end of the season, or is there something else?
I think it's because of something else. I think because this season has been the most even since 1928, and a lot of teams are still in contention for the finals. So I think it's becoming more stressful for teams. Some of them are going to extremes, such as punching their opponents in the head. And that's really not on, but I think that's the main reason, because we're having such an even season.
So everyone's still very serious. And speaking of colours, did you notice this weekend there are so many teams wearing yellow? I get confused personally.
Yes, I noticed that Adelaide have got yellow, West Coast have got yellow, Tigers have got yellow as well, and they look very, very similar, albeit they were playing in different games, of course, but imagine if they were playing in the same games, like if Adelaide was playing West Coast and they were wearing the yellow Guernseys, or the Tigers were playing West Coast, or they were playing Adelaide and they were wearing the same Guernseys. So I'm not sure why the yellow has come back in.
I just couldn't understand why they chose yellow, and that sort of resembled colours of umpires, and I got confused, and confusing in the double sense. I thought I was watching West Coast playing against this, and then next day I watched the other match, and is that West Coast back on? Oh no, it was Adelaide. Oh no, it was Richmond. And, they look all the same. And then there are other slightly less yellow, but the fluoro, sort of greenish yellow players. Oh, no, it's not players, it's umpires. That was very unfriendly to the TV viewers.
So it would have been better if it was black and white. But speaking of black and white, let's look at Collingwood. What's happening there, and do you think they're due for a new coach, Lynn?
I think, Eddie, the time has come. Debate should be whether Bucks should stay or go. But we should actually talk about his replacement. He has been there, for 6 years? And the team has gone down. The Magpies haven't played in the finals, final 8 for 3 years, 4 years. They are the team that won the premiership not so long ago.
Yes, well, Nathan Buckley did take over from Mick Malthouse in 2012, and in the preceding seasons, Collingwood won the premiership in 2010, and they were runners-up in 2011. So that's a premiership-winning team, and ever since Nathan Buckley took over the Collingwood team as the coach, they've gone backwards. They made the finals in 2012 and 2013. They haven't made the finals since. So I think it's time for a new coach for Collingwood, but who should they go for?
Yes, lots have been discussed. I've been speaking to a few Collingwood supporters and the Collingwood insiders as well, and some interesting names have been mentioned. Do you know Stuart Dew?
Yes, he's the assistant under John Longmire at the Sydney Swans.
And he used to play for Port Adelaide, Magpies.
Yes, he did used to play for Port Adelaide, and he also played for Hawthorn.
Yes, he knows how to win the games.
Now, there's also been discussion about Brad Scott, who is currently the coach of North Melbourne. There's also been discussion about Brad Scott doing a direct swap with Nathan Buckley, so that Nathan Buckley becomes the coach of North Melbourne and Brad Scott becomes the coach of Collingwood.
That sounds like a good deal. Wasn't it before that Nathan Buckley was promoted to become a Collingwood coach? I think North wanted him to coach North. And North instead got the Brad Scott. And Brad Scott's not doing as well as his twin brother. He may get booted. So it may make sense, doesn't it?
I think it does make sense, and also Brad Scott was an assistant coach at Collingwood before he took the job at North Melbourne, so there's a little bit of synchronicity there. But over the past few months we've been discussing code hopping as far as players are concerned, but do you think there's any room for code hopping amongst coaches? Should Collingwood be looking at a rugby league coach or a swimming coach or a chess tournament coach?
Well, I think they should really look outside the box, so to speak. They've been traditionally go for the former captains. Do you remember Tony Show?
Yes, I do.
And that gave the Collingwood fans a dark period for a few years, a lot darker than Nathan Buckley. Both of them are great captains, great courageous captain, premiership captain Tony Show. But they have this tradition of giving jobs to their favourite sons. And they should stop doing that. There was a talk of, maybe Scott Burns, who was also a Collingwood captain before, and he had a bit of experience at West Coast before he moved back to Collingwood. So Scott Burns' name has been discussed, but I think they have to look beyond that sort of traditional thing, as they did when they chose Mick Malthouse. But this time, I think they have to go even further afield. As you said, why not invite other coaches from other code, as long as they're not soccer coaches? I don't think soccer coaches fit into the our great, game.
No, I don't think the soccer coaches would be appropriate, but definitely a coach, a high profile and a good quality coach from netball or basketball or beach volley. And I'd suggest that they don't even need to stop at other sports. why not go for a politician or a political leader? Because I did notice that the leader of the Greens, Richard Di Natale, he actually used to play AFL for Coburg and Oakley in the Victorian Football Association. So do you think he could be poached as far as becoming the new coach for Collingwood?
Oh, why not? He surely knows how to play the hard ball. Yes, I noticed that he's been sort of criticised and kind of challenged by the Australian Greens from New South Wales, Lee Rhiannon, recently. And Di Natale, right from the beginning, he's, he doesn't mention too much about environment, sort of alienating traditional sort of Green supporter. But I think he's been doing a good job, but he may be able to do a better job at Collingwood. And then maybe the Greens can get Nathan Buckley.
Well, that would be a great swap. We talked about Brad Scott and Nathan Buckley doing a swap, but why not have Richard Di Natale as the new coach for Collingwood in 2018 and Nathan Buckley becomes the leader of the Greens? I think that would be a perfect swap.
Now, the other team that's sort of discussing the leadership kind of turmoil is your favourite Liberal Party. Can you explain that, Eddie?
Well, as we mentioned last week, Tony Abbott has been causing a little bit of mayhem. He said when he lost his Prime Ministership position in 2015, there would be no sniping from the sidelines, he'd be a team player, there would be no wrecking. But it keeps going on and on and on. And maybe Tony Abbott needs to be given a position as an AFL coach.
Which team?
Any team that would take him. But he hasn't been doing so well for the Liberal Party over the past, ever since he became opposition leader, if we want to be quite frank about it, in 2009. He hasn't really done much for the Liberal Party. Sure, he became Prime Minister in 2013, but he was booted out by his own party in 2015. I don't think any AFL team would take him on as a coach.
So you think Turnbull should stay on as the team leader?
He probably should stay on as the team leader, but there's always an opportunity for him to become an AFL coach as well. Maybe that could become the new pathway for former politicians. They become the leader of their party or leader for the country, as in the Prime Minister. Once they've done their job there, they can move over to the AFL.
Good call. Now, the other match or election or whatever we talked about last week and we correctly called was the Tokyo Metropolitan Government Assembly election. The ruling coalition, LDP, lost the election in the historical landslide scale. But this will undermine severely the leadership of Abe, and he may be available for a Collingwood job.
Do you think he'd take it if it was offered to him?
He might ask a few bucks, but he may be interested.
Well, that's one thing that I'd like to see. Former Japanese Prime Minister becoming the coach of Collingwood. We might not see that next year, but I'm sure that one day we'll see that in the near future. You're listening to The Protected Zone, where you can listen to us on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, at our website, theprotectedzone.com. Next up, we've got the new team song for Brisbane.
Yes, Brisbane's turn has to come. I mean, I quite like the Brisbane's song, but it is not really Brisbane's own song, is it?
No, it's actually the French national anthem. It's a very recognisable song. It's the La Marseillaise, which was actually written in 1792. It's the revolutionary song from the French Revolution, and it was used by the Fitzroy AFL club. So when Fitzroy suffered its demise in 1996 and Brisbane Bears became the Brisbane Lions, they adopted the La Marseillaise, which was also the Fitzroy team song.
And is that the same song that, the pop group from the 60s, the Beatles, didn't they use the bit of that too?
Well, let's listen to that. Yes, you're absolutely right. I can see the comparisons there. So, for the people that might have been living under a rock and have never heard the La Marseillaise, let's listen to that as well. there you have it. The La Marseillaise, which is also the Brisbane Lions team song, is very similar to the old Beatles song as well. So who copied who?
Yes, indeed. And talking about the Bears, I remember the Bears, but didn't they have a different song?
Initially, when they first were established in 1987, they had a song which was an original song. I do like original songs, but probably not this one. It was called We Are the Bears. It's not really a great song. So the next song that they used was Brisbane Bears Will Live Forever, which is sung to the tune of Glory, Glory, Alleluia. So that's got a little bit more uplift and pizzazz. Once they became the Brisbane Lions, both of those old team songs were lost forever. And apparently neither of those versions exist anymore. So they've both been lost by the AFL and also the Brisbane Lions. So there's no record of that. We know what the songs are, but no one has got a copy of it anymore.
Wow, that's forgotten history.
But they've had the La Marseillaise since 1997, and before that Fitzroy used it from 1920 onwards. So I think they're due for a change, but I don't think we can just give them any old song. It has to be another national anthem.
Oh, well, no, we look forward to that. And you're listening to The Protected Zone, and we're going to review the round 16 matches.
So, round 16, there's lots of things going on there. I think that the first match that we should look at is the Friday night match. It's always a big match on Friday night. Adelaide versus Western. We've got two underperforming teams. Who will underperform the least?
That's a hard one. And as I said in the review of the round 15, the Dogs are still sort of timing carefully, waiting for the right time to make the charge. They're aiming at number 7. And as long as they get to number 7, I think they're confident they can do it again. But anything higher, anything lower, they can't. So I think in this week they might underperform a bit. On the other hand, Adelaide, they have to keep winning. They're sort of in the sort of slumpy mode at the moment. They were challenged last week by the Carlton. And they want to prove that they can.
Well, as I mentioned, both teams for me are underperforming, but the difference between the two teams is that Western Bulldogs are underperforming and they're losing. Adelaide are underperforming, but they're winning. So that's the big difference between these two teams. And for me, it really is that question about who will underperform the least. They are playing the game at the Adelaide Oval. I think that Adelaide will probably win this game.
I think Adelaide has got the edge.
Collingwood and Essendon. Now, this is a huge match, and it's the Anzac Day match, but it's played on a different day. I know that these two teams are not in the top 8 at the moment, and a lot of people have been saying that Collingwood have run their race for this year and their season is over. I'm not so sure. I'm still tipping a very, very big match here.
Oh, yes, it's going to be a big match. And Essendon has managed to lose in the final quarters in 2 weeks in a row. And the Collingwood, you're right, Eddie, they could still make it to top 8 if they win 7 of coming 8 matches. I mean, they have to start now. And it's going to be a huge match. It may not be as big as Anzac Day as such. Are they going to do the rituals again, like armies playing national anthem and the standing?
Well, I hope they do, because it definitely makes the game a little bit more exciting. So I guess it's up to the AFL whether they want to bring out all the military platoons and the armies and that sort of thing. So let's see if they do. But you mentioned before that Collingwood has to win their next 7 games in a row to make the finals. In this crazy 2017 season, you can't discount anything. They could win their next 7 games to reach the finals and then win the next 4 games to win the premiership. So who knows what's going to happen in this season. But I think it's going to be a very tough match. Essendon, for me, have fallen asleep at the wheel. They fell asleep at the wheel in the last match and the match before that. I think they've fallen asleep at the wheel of the season. So I'm expecting Collingwood to win this game.
Oh, that's a big call. And the Collingwood lost 2 key players for this week's match against Essendon. I would go for Essendon.
Lynn, there's another big match happening which I think is going to define the ladder in a very significant way. It's St Kilda against Richmond.
Now, that's going to be a huge match, and I think it's going to be a better quality match than the Collingwood versus Essendon, even though they own the Anzac Day match and stuff. But St Kilda, Richmond, both coming off gutsy wins, and as you said, yes, they are in the top 8 at the moment, but Richmond in a very, very, very unfamiliar territory of top 4. Now, will that affect them psychologically?
Well, when you mentioned that Richmond is in the top 4, I had to do a double take, and I thought, are they really in the top 4? And I checked the ladder, and yes, they are in the top 4. And also St Kilda, I didn't really have to do a double take when you said that they're in the top 8, because I already knew that anyway. But it's unfamiliar territory for St Kilda, and it's very, very, very unfamiliar territory for Richmond. So I think it's just a question of which team finds itself in a more unfamiliar position and which team is more unused to the situation that they're in. And Richmond were absolutely fantastic against Port Adelaide last week. St Kilda were very good as well, but they're doing the trip back from Perth, St Kilda, so they might run out of legs. I'm going for Richmond in this game.
I think St Kilda will play another trick. You know, Nick Riewoldt has got a few more tricks, and I'll go for the Saints.
So there's just a few more games to go in this round, so let's just look at some quick tips. And every match is actually a big match. Hawthorn against Greater Western Sydney. What can we expect to see there?
Now, Hawthorn's still got the mathematical chance, and that chance is better than Collingwood. They only need to win, I think, 6 out of next 8 or something, including this one. So they could lose a couple of more games before they have to get serious. And on the other hand, the GWS, they're in a good form. They regained a few injured players and expecting Toby Green to come back and kick a few more goals and spin a few discs. And they're in the groove. I will go for GWS.
Greater Western Sydney for me too. Sydney against Gold Coast. That's being played in Sydney. Sydney have been the form team over the past 2 months now. Gold Coast are up and down. I think because it's being played at the Sydney Cricket Ground and also because Gold Coast has never beaten Sydney ever, I think that Sydney will win this game.
Well, that's what you would say in an ordinary year and ordinary round. But this game is going to be the boil-over, upset of the round. Gold Coast will win for the first time.
Brisbane against Geelong. Brisbane, they're the bottom team. Geelong are one of the top teams. They're not right on top of the ladder. Brisbane, nobody predicted that they were going to defeat Essendon last week, except for Lin Tanganan. This one's being played at the Wollongabba in Brisbane.
Yeah, good old Gabba, their home ground. And the Brisbane with a new team song against the Geelong regaining the good old Selwood and Menzel, who missed the last week's game. Well, Geelong should win, but I like the energy of Brisbane. I think it's going to be the big week for football in Queensland. Gold Coast and Brisbane, both the winners.
I'll go for Brisbane in this game too. North Melbourne against Fremantle. It's a match being played in Melbourne. And Fremantle have lost some very, very close matches. They've actually become the new title holders of the honourable losers. North Melbourne, they were the honourable losers at the beginning of the year, but now they're into the dishonourable losses. What can we expect to see in this game?
Yeah, the losers versus losers. I mean, as you said, North are not honourable anymore. And the Fremantle lost, 6 or 7, 8 matches in a row or something. They just both can't win. So this could be another draw of a very, very substandard game, I think.
Well, draws come in threes usually, so there was not a draw for about 3 seasons, and I think that we can expect to see another draw this weekend as well.
And I think this time we got the right team, right match.
We've got the right teams and the right game. West Coast against Port Adelaide. This one's being played in Perth. And it's a big, big match.
Big match. Port has got a lot to prove, and the West Coast winning in Melbourne makes them feel good. I think they would like to continue this feeling good, continue on, and they're back home. They're home boys, and they should feel very good about it, even though Port, potentially dangerous, but they haven't beaten anyone in the top 8, and that should continue, West Coast.
Port Adelaide have got a very good record in Subiaco, so I'm going for Port Adelaide.
Well, we've got the few split decisions, but we agreed that there's going to be another draw.
So you've been listening to The Protected Zone, and you can listen to us on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, or go to our website at theprotectedzone.com. And we've got a fantastic round 16 coming up. We're going to go out with the new team song for Brisbane.
Yeah, Brisbane people should love this. It's not as good as perhaps French national anthem, but I think it's better. And, Bears had a few songs. Brisbane can have a few songs, and it's that kind of year.
Yes, it is. So here it is, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye.